All right.
Okay.
I don't know. It's Flash Friday. It's October 16th. It's been a long week for Todd and Doug. Nothing really went our way from the demos we wanted to do, so we're just going to cold open and say that didn't happen.
Yeah, we were aiming this morning. I'll be honest. I put it off until this morning. I got up a little early and was working on it, and
I didn't.
I was going to automate a Minesweeper game. And it was actually, I was really happy with myself. I thought it was a clever idea. I made it really far down the path. And then I find out you can't set your X and Y on your click, at least that I've found yet, with a variable. I was going to do random X, Ys on the game field, and I got stuck. So
I got overly ambitious, tried to change my code to use the new reference architecture, and broke all of it.
Sometimes you just have a failure, and you learn and you move on, right?
I'm learning, and I'll be back next week with my cool, calm solution with the GitHub repo, and hopefully it'll be functional. So if you try and go use it, as opposed to me show you something and go, hey, wait, why don't you hang around until you can go do this? Because I want to be like, here it is, and you can go do it. And now all I could be is like, here it kind of is. And imagine if this part worked, and then you can't go do it. So yeah, I decided instead. Instead, we would do some news, right?
Let's do it.
And
what do you got?
I got a few things actually, and I'm going into a little bit of deep dive on a few things, and so I wanted to cover a little bit first. There was an interesting announcement from the team side about at Ignite about the general availability of the Microsoft Graph Connects. Okay, but one of the things that changed around that, I may just have to hop over live to my notebook and go grab this, was as part of that release cycle, we did a general availability of the Microsoft Teams Graph Membership API.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this matter? Because every other example I've ever shown you uses the Group Membership API, which apparently has something that I didn't quite realize on top of it as I read this one, is that sometimes additions and removals took as long as, please read that number for me, Mr. Kidda.
It does say 48 hours.
It does say 48 hours, which when you're talking about dynamic workflows to update team memberships and collaboration environment might not be what you were expecting.
I think that's 2 days in the metric system, isn't that right?
Is it in the metric system? Okay, or is it also in the imperial system? I think time's relative, isn't it? Like,
That's what Einstein said.
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking with Paul Robinson out of the UK. We're working on this flow. Then we were changing like a document, and we're waiting for the thing to pick up the changes. And we're like, it's taking 2 seconds. Like, we just did it. Like, it's a globally distributed fabric. There's like people from all over the world editing it, and we want events in less than sub 1 second. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but 48 hours seems excessive. And this API membership framework will let you get what you're going on top of it. Remember, you can play with the stuff for the Graph Explorer. It's just in the common post command. It's not hard to do. The whole purpose, the reason the logo for the show looks the way it looks is because it's supposed to be mind the gap, right? There's a GUI, an API, and a power for something. And this is one of my API lessons for on top of that kind of stuff. So I got that one. The other one was that I want to talk a little bit about Office add-ins. And yeah, they're very useful, but a whole bunch of updates and changes happen on top of this. You're snickering. Is there commentary?
What are we talking about here? What kind of Office add-ins are we talking about?
Like all the add-ins that are in Office, like the little buttons, ribbon extensions, things you might do, like yeah, I mean, you use all sorts of them. You may not know where they come from or whence they're managed or how they're controlled or who can do that. But there's a whole centralized deployment framework. We probably covered the centralized deployment framework when it first started to be previewed, I don't know, probably 2.5 years ago. Like we said, hey, here's all these cool things you can do around it. But sometimes things advance. I like to go back and reprise and remind because maybe people aren't messing around or dealing stuff with this. This is a recommended approach for deploying Office add-ins, right? Deploy it to a small stakeholder set, get it to a larger. You're supposed to ring this thing. I mean, come on, people, right? So but there's the centralized components and add-ons. But what happened was they announced, not over there, a new framework on the privacy and performance and the permission choices that are out there. So there's a link in the blog on top of that as to how you do consent for those different Office add-ins and all sorts of other stuff. So it really kind of got a nice little uptick of functionality around publishing and managing the Office add-ins. And they kind of show like, here's, where you've got, here's the selected add-in, do you want to have it for everyone and specific users? What are the kind of things you're going to have, right? What does deployment look like? A whole bunch of considerations for add-ins. So some changes to essentially, we've been going through and updating all the application consents and the store consents and the Azure AD application consent. And we've been going, this is another example of one of those where we sort of cleaned it up and made it more enterprise ready from a tiering standpoint. So if you haven't reviewed the centralized admin permissions and grant frameworks for it, go check it out.
Right on, okay.
I got a security one that's super, super near and dear to my heart, and probably I would have bumped. I missed this. I completely got to give it up to a couple of friends of mine who said, hey, Doug, you haven't covered this. And I'm like, you're right, I didn't. And it was from September 7th that they announced the Microsoft Defender Application Guard for Office. Did you see any of this at all or anything?
It seems vaguely familiar.
Okay, so we've talked about Microsoft Defender, for endpoint, right? And then there's Defender Application Guard, which is essentially an instrumentation of the Windows 10 Application Guard functionality, which, if you recall, much like the Cred Guard, uses the virtualization and isolation properties of a hypervisor to essentially put things in containers, okay? We put the LSA in a container when we're talking about Cred Guard, and this doesn't mean that you can't attack it, but it means it's really hard to sneak across the room and do it while you're doing something else. It becomes very obvious. If I had the bank across a well-lit parking lot, you have to traverse that to get to the bank, whereas if they were all in the same shopping mall, it'd be hard if, with all the crowds to understand what's going on. And so this principle of observed isolation, so all the security products can go, you're not supposed to be doing that. Whereas if, you get these token handlers, well, Office is fertile ground, right? People do amazing things in Office, add-ins and properties and macros and all sorts of stuff. And we're supposed to have, if you're using macros and other things, have a signing for them, right? And you're supposed to know which ones came from your organization. I pause while Todd chuckles. Okay, so supposed to. And then, of course, people say, well, you turn everything off. Or I make the users say yes. And then users go into what I just call, whatever mode. And they're like, okay, click, click, click. All right. And I don't mean that negatively. People are busy and they're like, I need to do this. And I got it from a trusted source. I trust Todd, so I'm going to roll with it. And so they go through the Defender Application Guard and what its purpose is and all the rest of the stuff. But it really starts diving into Office. And it says, hey, look, how when you open an Office document, you get the little protected mode? Right? Yeah. Okay. So there's that user sandbox mode, but this really uncars all the controls you have, and including the advanced controls around doing that stuff. It tells you exactly how and why it decided to or not to trust that location, why that label was applied to it. I think maybe people don't really understand that. Even a lot of enterprise admins don't understand how that comes through. But then it says, hey, look, let's go ahead and pick on one. So they basically said Clemson Tigers football resume templates. They went out to the internet and got a document, which I absolutely love. And notice how it says, when this functionality is activated, to keep you safe, we're opening this document in Application Guard. And now you're in Defender Application Guard for Office. So you've got this, resume document on top of it. Now you can read it, and it's in its own container. Right? It's not capable of getting out and doing other components on top of it. And if you look, you'll actually see this tag that the file was opened in Application Guard because of an untrusted source. Okay. It says if you trust it, you need to open it without restriction, and you're going to need to put it somewhere, right? Yeah. So to continue, you're going to do File Save As, right? And you have on top of it. So next, I'll go into the local saved folder, and there's the website. And notice it opens again in Application Guard for Office.
So it's opening now locally in Application Guard.
Yeah, it's like, you saved it, right? But we're still keeping this sucker safe, right? Because it came from an unknown location. Now, if you wanted to save it outside of that container, right, you can hit the remove, right? And it says, hey, look, but the file is automatically scanned for any types of malicious threats or embedded scripts using Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. It's important that SafeDocs is enabled to have that functionality on top of it. So now we've got it. It says you're going to remove protection. It's like, okay, hang tight. Yeah. You want to say this is safe, but Todd, I'm not so sure how good you are at determining.
I want to really fully open it in Word.
Yeah. Or put it somewhere, maybe in a business store or something else. Like you were in Word before and you could do lightweight editing, but now you're about to do something. It said, I required you to open an Application Guard. The file is an untrusted source, right? And the active content in this file has been, all right, I let you do it. It's here now. You're in the kind of the fuller mode of Word, but I still got these macros disabled. Agreed? All right. Yep. So I've sort of let you one step further into it. And you're like, you know what, though? I really I really want to run these macros.
I really am just into this. Let's do this.
I do, right? I'm totally on board. I really, really want to remove protection
You're really
from this.
committed at this point, yes.
And it says, yeah, okay. Yeah, you know, or no, right? Because that didn't look like it was legit. Okay.
Okay.
And the user says, yeah, all right, I'm going to enable content. It says, well, okay, but no.
No.
Okay, because the macros in this document are in fact malicious. I tried to keep you safe at multiple layers, and now I'm going to close because you're not supposed to be doing this.
All right. And so
Agreed?
the user gets blocked.
So only dangerous things. If you try and move.
In this case, yes. In this
case. Now, if there had not been malicious payloads, if there had not been hostile content, there had not been those things, you still would have been protected by isolation. But it's that isolation container that is allowing it to observe the malicious behavior. Make sense? Like,
yeah.
I put you in a room and I said, don't do anything. And you immediately got out a match and started, you know, like,
playing with fire, yeah.
And playing with fire. I'm like, I'm not going to let you do that.
My question is, who has this? Like, who has this capability? Who doesn't have this capability? How do they light it up?
So you would need to own the Microsoft Defender capabilities and also the Windows 10 Enterprise, pretty sure, because that's where the Credential Guard or the App Guard entitlement. Yep. So here it is right there. So it says, here's the hardware requirements.
Okay.
So you'd have to have a 64-bit CPU with virtualization extensions, probably have that, right? And you can't do App Guard or Cred Guard anyway without it. So i5 or equivalent or higher. By the way, it's important to note when Microsoft does baseline performance testing of Windows on a given platform, they do it with those things turned on.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not impacting performance by using some of these isolation techniques, right? And it is not in an appreciable manner. So it's really important to know that we don't baseline without seatbelts on. Does that make any sense? Like so when you're comparison shopping, now it's not to say you can't turn those off and gain a performance improvement, but if you're looking at the performance of a computer by its specifications and you're comparing between compute families, this is performance. We benchmark with security on. We've been doing that for several years now. So so hopefully, you know, and now they announced that productivity score, which has the boot score composite and the rest of those things, like how fast is it booting and what's the source of your problems, what's your login overhead time, which I've been trumpeting for years. You know that, like I love this stuff. That's shipping here in October, and I will be definitely covering that after our demo week. But I think it's amazing content. I think it's amazing stuff. So there's the recipe card for it. Right now, it's the Office beta channel build, right? So there's on top of that one, and then Windows 10 Enterprise Edition from 2020 H1, which would be 19041. All right. Mm-hmm. So the 20 H1 release for Windows on top of it. So if you're staying current, another good reason to stay current, right? Yep. On top of this. So I admit it's a little more for current generation of users, but man, the safety nets are amazing.
This is awesome. And I wanted to make sure that people knew whether or not they were going to have it, what do they need to get it? And, you know, because that's amazing. That's
yeah. So my gut instinct, and I can go double check. I mean, for sure, an M365 E5 customer owns the full entitlement.
Yep.
I'm not 100% certain. You'd have to have some of the other components of ATP for some of this to come in. So I would suspect that you'd also have to have the ATP entitlement if you were a lower than ME5 entitlement customer. But I can demystify that if somebody really wants me to. And maybe it's just here in the blog. I thought this was such a nice screenshot visual of like, look, we kept you safe. We kept you safe. You said you didn't want us to keep you safe. We kept letting you do things right up until the point where you said you tried to enable the macros that were going to launch executables. And we look,
this is kind of like how I parent, right? It's like,
yeah. Now remember, Defender Advanced, the Defender Endpoint Manager is not even going to trigger. Okay. Because Office stopped this. Does that make sense? Like that's really an important thing. It never got to the point of triggering the security department because nothing was permitted to happen that warranted it. Because if that were to have gone and it were to have fired off, according to security best practices, you would have to go through a full remediation, which is the reason we bought the Hexadite stuff, right? So you could go back and say, how do I return this to homeostasis? How do I know this machine is back to my good place again? And this, you don't need to worry about it because you never took the you didn't eat the 10 pounds of bacon that we now need to do a cholesterol check for, right? You never got a chance to do it. So so this is why I like this one, why I spent most of the time on it. I got one other thing before I hand it over to you. Okay. There is an amazing, awesome, you know how much I love the Office scripts in Excel?
I do.
Functionality where you can automate things. You can call and invoke them from Power Apps and Flow. There's an Ignite session, which I will put into it, that's done by one of the program marketing managers that goes through the entirety of the example. And so it is Petra Ronald, who does an amazing job of walking through the entirety of this sort of framework as to what's happening. And what she covers in this one is how to record actions in Excel on the web. Then how to edit that code to make it neutral, not just to the spreadsheet you recorded them on, but for any spreadsheet of the month. How to run those scripts, share them amongst people, and then use Power Automate to automate the entire thing. So if you had a report tune-up operation, I couldn't have built a better demo myself, so I'm just gonna give full props to this one and put the link out and say, watch this. It's 40 minutes, but it is, I think—
These are the things that make you remember like why Office is Office.
Why Office, and now why Office scripts. And they talk about the script model, and they show the little inline Visual Studio code editor, just made little tears came to my eyes. It was beautiful, it was wonderful.
That's amazing.
And so that is all I have today. Go check this one out. We'll be back.
Notes for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's totally, it's like one of those gems that's worth the watch. And they've come so far. The Office scripts automation action, how scripts are stored in OneDrive and shared between people. It's great. It's amazing. And if you like Excel, standardized reporting and automation, and I've told people before, this is where Office automation is going. Like, this is the kernel of Office automation. That the inheritor of VBA is this stuff. So check it out. Go on. I might be a little enthusiastic about it. So there you go.
Amazing.
All right. So I am gonna cut over to Tagline while I get you on screen. What do you have for us while I put you on stage?
I've got my usual Power Platform. I've just become the Power Platform person, I think, on here. So is that okay? I think that's all right, right?
I hope so.
Okay, good. So I got some Power Platform stuff. I'm touching it all today. So this is cool. This is a new experience. This is posted on the Power BI blog. But it really applies currently to the Power Platform Admin Center around the ability to manage data sources, kind of a little differently than before, what was under gateways, right? So, and currently, like I said, this is only under the Power Platform Admin Center. Will be coming to the Power BI Admin Center, and then we'll eventually replace Managed Gateways. So this is the ability to kind of drill down more from a data source perspective, which is frankly really how we're, you think about it, like what SQL Server is this data cluster, is the gateway tied to, and how can I see more information about this, rather than kind of coming at it from the lens of the gateway. So, and then of course, like managing users and all those kinds of things. So I think this is really going to help as organizations have moved beyond just maybe having one or two gateways, looking at it from the lens of the data source. I think kind of makes a lot of sense. So I think this is pretty cool. Check this out if you have gateways. Speaking of gateways, there's an update. And usually I don't cover this anymore because, I look at this post every month, and if it just says the mashup engine, I skip it because I kind of assume at this point, hopefully people are operationalizing. I guess it's been a while since I've said it, but operationalize the update of your gateways. This stuff ships every month. You're going to get your if nothing else, from a security perspective, bug fixes, all of that, as well as every time we ship a Power BI desktop update, there's things that are going to be baked into the following subsequent data gateway that are related. So definitely check that out. But the big one this month is OAuth support, which is great. So previously we had OAuth support for import for SQL, but now we are supporting this for SQL and Kusto, right? So Kusto being things like App Insights or Data Explorer, those kinds of things. It says Kusto, so I actually want to make sure that I'm thinking about like what that's supporting as far as the data source itself. Kusto is a language that lives in other tooling, right? So but I'm getting a little bit of a buzz again. So maybe if you're not on mute. But please talk if you want to talk. I'm not telling you to be quiet. So never would do that. So OAuth support, BigQuery connector support for the gateway, which is great. Again, look at this, supporting OAuth. I'm guessing there was a dependency there on that. Performance monitoring on by default, which is good stuff. Which so maybe you were, maybe or maybe not, you weren't aware that the The gateway supported some performance metrics. We've talked about that in the past, but you can click through this link and kind of read more about that. Of course, we have the October version. And there's some notes here around deprecation, around some of the stuff for SSO, Kerberos, SAP BW. So very specific things if you're using some of the SAP stuff. So definitely, if these deprecation notices apply to you, you're using SAP, this is worth a look for a moment to make sure that you're not going to be impacted. Cool. So Power Apps. This is nice because it's always nice to get a new coat of paint on some things, right? So what we were shipping in preview inside of Power Apps is the Fluent modern UI controls, which look a lot like what? Look a lot like Teams, right? So which makes sense because I think Power Apps is going to continue to be more and more prevalent, relevant, embedded inside of Teams, which is I think all goodness. So it might as well make sense that the UI should be consistent. So this should be pretty good. It kind of goes through of how you can update some of your existing controls to the new modern Fluent controls. That's right, friend.
Every time I unmute, I buzz. So I'm just staying silent and nodding.
Smile. What is that? Smile and wave. Yeah, there we go. All right. Cool. So again, feel free to come off mute, Doug. Now I feel kind of lonely now that you're on mute. This is weird. This is really cool. There's a ton of stuff that has gone GA inside of AI Builder, some of which we've already talked about in preview, but it's worth kind of revisiting. Man, this stuff is getting really, really good. I like this one especially. I'll just kind of scroll down and start talking about that one and see what we got. So forms processing, be able to explicitly tag things that were not found by the form analyzer. So if you look at this example, obviously this is an invoice. We have a date and a due date that weren't discovered as part of the initial kind of analysis of the form. So being able to go in and start to tag it automatically. Look at this, we're in a web browser. This is just so cool.
Hey, Todd, I know I'm probably buzzing again, but did you see the AI announcements where they achieved human parity in describing photos?
Yeah, that was amazing.
We should include that in the link and the little video they talk about for doing it, the public video on it. I'm telling you, astonishing. And what it means for search and findability of assets is, I don't even have words. It's such a massive leap forward in processing and analytic capability.
It's amazing.
And all that stuff, those learnings are applied to this stuff, which is, and you can see the improvements. Amazing work, amazing.
So some of the, we will include that link, and some of the like one of the examples that I remember in the post was around, they showed before and after, right? Previous tech, current tech. And there was a street shot, maybe it was San Francisco, I don't remember where.
It was.
The trolley, right? Yeah, and the previous was a street, right? It was basically something like a street in a city or something. This one was like a street with a trolley in it. And it wasn't just like a vehicle or a car, whereas it was pretty generic. It was a trolley, right? So
yeah, one was also this, it was like a person leaping up to get a baseball, and it was like a man skateboarding up a wall. And then it was a person catching a baseball or leaping to catch a baseball. And you were like, and like a pile of food, a pile of coffee beans. Like it was, the refinement of it was astonishing.
In like 5 years. I mean, I could go, 5, 10, you could say all the years. But when I'm thinking about, for some reason in my mind, like 2014, 2015 was, and maybe that was about the year that I think Alexa came out. And I think that was really the year that like voice interaction really became actually usable, right? And the promise of what we are calling AI now started to really become real for a lot of people. The progress that we made in that time is just disgustingly amazing. And I think we're to the point now too, where it's like, I'm hoping, I mean, AI is still kind of overhyped as far as like where it is and what it can do. But if you're really looking at it, even from the pragmatist perspective of what AI really is and isn't, it's still amazing, right? So this tech is absolutely incredible. And to your point, findability of assets and things like that. And I only have hope that this stuff is going to continue to get better and make content more relevant and make the world more accessible, frankly, also, right? Because I mean, it's kind of obvious.
That was the big play on this, the accessibility. Every page is now lit up with accurate for those who are vision impaired. Amazing.
Yeah, it is absolutely stunning. I mean, honestly, I got a little bit of chills when I saw it, right? So it's really good stuff. So more AI, here we go. Text translation, GA. So that's pretty straightforward, translating text, things like that. Receipt processing, this is pretty cool. We've been working on this for a while. It's funny, the whole article is called, these are GA, but here's this preview GA. Anyway, it's preview. So receipt processing, being able to pull line items out, being able to pull other information out. We spent a lot of information or a lot of time on that. Invoice processing starter kit. So kind of weaving and stitching all these things together that kind of, show you how to do that. Kind of an accelerator. So this is very cool. And some more, of course, dedicated actions to support these things. So check this out. This is really cool. Really amazing things. I love the forms processor and the ability to kind of tag some of these things, the receipts. That's really neat. Man, I'm just absolutely falling in love with UI flows. And this is really cool that we've published some, we're calling it a playbook around some best practices and information around how to be successful automating SAP GUIs. And really how to mix and match, not only like how to do the UI piece, but what are some best practices around automating SAP in general, not just the UI flows. So this kind of shows some examples of where you would want to use the API flows, which, the non-UI flows, kind of classic flow to start to do some things, and then where to fall back to the UI flows to kind of complete your job. Because to me, the UI flows is all about the last mile, right, of automation. The things that you can't get through APIs. Use the API if it's there, of course. Hopefully that doesn't need to be said. But if there's this last mile, there's this thing you can't automate, and that's why it's there. And frankly, as we know, sometimes that last mile, that long tail is very, 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 very long, right? So the ability to kind of plug some of those gaps and fill some of those gaps is really great. So this really gives some in-depth analysis around life cycle and how to think about using Power Automate for SAP. And frankly, even if you don't have SAP, this is probably a useful read to kind of give you some learnings around robust, full-featured life cycle of these flows in an enterprise scenarios. So I think this is great stuff. Again, kind of shows the maturity of the platform. I think UI flows is getting there very quickly, actually, to kind of have this great guidance. So that's all I had. Hopefully both of us have better luck this week with our demos. I would love to show you a really cool UI flows desktop, Power Automate desktop demo next week. So I'll have to think of something more interesting and not wait to the last minute next time. So sorry about that.
And I'll fix the echo buzz thing. That'll be my due. And I'll have my GitHub repo with my stuff ready. So thanks for dealing with the audio issues. And everybody have a great and fabulous weekend. It snowed here in Minneapolis today. I'm a little scandalized by that. I called Todd a few minutes ago and showed him a video. I'm like, look what's happening in my house. I'm not ready for this. Yeah. I'm just not. We got like a quarter inch of snow, and I'm not okay with it, Todd. I'm just not. So it's too soon. Everyone, be safe, be well, take care of yourself and your family.
Yes.
And that's all we got for this week. We'll see you next week.
Peace. Cheers.